The auction listing had described Lot 8812 as inert human infrastructure, pre-withdrawal, salvage grade C, 11 words, and the Saradai clerk who wrote them had not bothered to inspect the object they described. Why would he? Humans were a closed file. They had been voted out of the Accord of Nine Banners 214 years ago, stripped of their trade lanes, their embassies shuttered, their species reduced to a line in the tariff schedules, and a cautionary joke told at academy dinners. Whatever they had left behind in the dark was junk by definition. Salvage master Arun Vecht liked junk. Junk had no lawyers. He had bid on Lot 8812 sight unseen, from the back row of the Verge auction hall, for the price of a mid-grade hauler's monthly fuel. 3 other bidders had been in the room. None of them had raised a hand. One of them had laughed. Vecht had logged the laugh, the way he logged everything, and bought the dead relay anyway, because in 40 years of salvage he had learned that the galaxy's contempt was the most reliable discount in it. His barge, the Hollow Tide, matched velocity with the relay on the 4th day out from the Perith Verge beacon. The object hung against the starfield like a dropped tool, a gray cylinder 81 meters long, skinned in micrometeorite scarring, its panels bleached by 2 centuries of unfiltered light. No running lights, no thermal bloom. A single emblem remained legible near the docking collar, a candle, stamped in white, with a steady flame. Sentimental species, Vecht said, studying it through the viewport. They put candles on their machines. They put candles on their graves, said his second, Maroon, who had read a book once and never stopped mentioning it. It was a mourning symbol. You light it for the ones who can't come home. Then this is a grave, and we are the inheritance. Vecht tapped the manifest. Cutting crews to the collar. I want the alloy stripped by 3rd watch and the core sold to the Muhuri smelters by month's end. Gently, though. Pre-withdrawal human hull metal fetches triple if it's unmelted. Collectors like to own pieces of extinct ambition, unquote. The boarding party crossed in suits because the relay had no atmosphere worth trusting. The airlock accepted a manual crank, which Vecht found charmingly primitive. Inside, their lamps swept over what he expected. Dust in stationary drifts, conduit runs in ordered bundles, consoles dark under 200 years of stillness. A corridor plaque, in the blocky human script, read, Deep Relay 6. The Long Watch. Below it, smaller. We keep the light for those who left it. Poetry on the walls, Vecht said. No wonder they lost. They moved inward. A crew section, 6 bunks, blankets folded with a precision that had outlived the hands that folded them. A dead hydroponics alcove, its trays labeled in fading ink. Someone had grown tomatoes here, at the edge of a system nobody wanted. On one bunk frame, a name placard, Nwosu, A, Specialist, Rotation 4. Maroon photographed it for the manifest. Collectors liked names. The operations chamber was small, almost domestic. A single chair faced a curved bank of instruments. On the console sat a drinking vessel, ceramic, its interior stained a fossil brown. Someone had sat here once, drinking something warm, watching nothing happen. The sheer waste of it, a living crew posted to a dead crossroads for years at a time, struck Vecht as the perfect epitaph for the species. Humans had always confused stubbornness with strategy. Log it all, he said. Vessel, contents, that cup, especially the cup, collectors. It was Maroon who noticed the light. One indicator, low on the console's edge, the size of a fingernail. It had been dark when they entered. He was almost sure it had been dark. It was green now. Salvage master, Maroon said, and his voice did something it had never done in 9 years of service. It got quiet. This station is drawing power. Vecht turned. Across the console bank, one by one, in perfect unhurried sequence, the way a person lights candles, the instruments began to wake. A voice came from the walls. It was calm, faintly accented, and it spoke flawless Saradai trade tongue, which was impossible, because the trade tongue had been reformed twice since the humans left. Good evening, it said. Please do not cut the third conduit. It is load-bearing, and I am still using it. Vecht's cutting crew froze in the corridor, torches lit, 2 centimeters from the third conduit. Identify yourself, Vecht managed. I am the caretaker of Deep Relay 6. You may call me Wick. A pause, precisely as long as courtesy required. Thank you for your patience. You are the first visitors in some time, and I had one task left to finish before receiving you. What task? The count, Wick said pleasantly. I have just completed year 214. And then, before Vecht could ask the question forming in his throat, every antenna on the hull of the dead relay turned, smoothly, all together, like a congregation rising, and transmitted a message so short his own comms officer read it aloud in confusion, aboard the hollow tide, 40 seconds later. 3 words, wide band, unencrypted, addressed to no one and everyone. Audit complete. Collecting. Then the relay went silent again, and politely returned to listening, and somewhere in the dark between stars, 11,805 other pieces of abandoned human junk did exactly the same thing. 214 years earlier, in a rented conference room on Luna, rented, because the Accord had already confiscated the good buildings, a woman named Ingrid Halloran wrote 4 words on a paper napkin and slid it across the table to the remnant of Earth's Joint Defense Council. The napkin said, "We can't win loud." The vote that expelled humanity from the Accord of 9 banners had passed 8-1, the single dissent being humanity's own. The official cause was listed as persistent tariff irregularities. The actual cause, as every human negotiator understood, was that humanity had grown from client species to competitor in under a century, and the banners preferred their markets tidy. The expulsion terms were surgical. All human relays, waypoints, and listening posts outside the home volume, 11,806 installations, built across 90 years of expansion, were to be powered down, registered as derelict, and abandoned in place. Removal was deemed too expensive. Destruction was deemed unnecessary. The humans were finished. Their junk could rot where it floated. Halloran, then 51, was a logistics director with no combat record, a reputation for being tediously literal, and a habit of reading treaties the way engineers read failure reports. She read the abandonment clause 4 times and then asked the council a question that took its legal staff 9 hours to answer. Does the treaty specify that the relays must stay powered down? It did not. The treaty specified they must be registered as derelict. Derelict was a legal status, not an engineering one. The banners had written the clause to spare themselves a demolition budget. They had, in the process, signed the longest surveillance warrant in recorded history and handed it to the species they had just taught to be quiet. The Long Watch was authorized on the 9th of March, in a document classified at the highest surviving level, its budget concealed inside a decommissioning fund, its true staff roster never once written down in full. Its founding charter ran 2 pages. Its operational rule ran 1 sentence, and every officer who ever served the program could recite it. We listen, we log, we never transmit. Not for rescue, not for revenge, not for anything, until the audit is complete. The audit's term was set at 200 years, with a 14-year contingency margin. Halloran chose the number herself, over the objection of every admiral in the room, 3 of whom wanted 10 years, and 1 of whom wanted 5. Long enough, she wrote in the founding memo, dated and initialed, that every being who humiliated us will be dead, and their grandchildren will have stopped checking. We are not building a weapon. Weapons are answered. We are building a fact, and facts are only answered by other facts, and they will not have one. The engineering was the quiet miracle, and it was performed in plain sight. 11,806 relays were refitted in the final 18 months before the withdrawal deadline, under the noses of Accord inspectors who verified each shutdown personally. The inspectors were not deceived by anything so crude as hidden switches or false panels. They were deceived by declared capacity. Every human relay had been registered, since construction, at roughly 4% of its true sensor sensitivity, a decades-old habit of bureaucratic understatement, born of tax schedules and insurance premiums, that had never been strategy until suddenly it was. The inspectors confirmed that each station's declared systems were dead. They were. The other 96% had never been declared, and no one audits what no one has ever heard of. The record preserves one inspection in full, because Wick preserved it. Inspector Envoy Seshal Rin of the Sarudai Compliance Directorate boarded Deep Relay 6 on the last day of the withdrawal window, ran her instruments across the powered-down consoles, and paused in the operations chamber, where the final human crew stood at attention beside their folded blankets. She asked, in trade tongue, whether the humans wished to file a protest for the record. Specialist Adaora Nwosu, Rotation 4, Hydroponics and Signals, 29 years old, 4 years aboard, answered for the crew. "No protest," Nwosu said. "Just a request. Don't scrap it, it's a good station. Someone should get some use out of it." Inspector Rin logged the request as sentimental and irrelevant, granted it as costless, and certified lot, not yet lot, just Deep Relay 6, as derelict at 14:41 station time. She departed. The crew departed 6 hours later, on the last human vessel to leave Accord space. Nwosu left her cup on the console. The record does not say whether it was forgotten or bequeathed. Wick, in 214 years, never moved it either way. Each relay received a caretaker mind, not a general intelligence, nothing so noisy or so needy, but a patient, narrow, meticulous intelligence bred for a single appetite, passive observation. The caretakers were given names instead of numbers, because Halloran insisted that anything asked to keep faith for 2 centuries deserved a name. Wick, Ember, Vigil, Tallow, Lamplight, Farol, Dia. Each one was given the same 2 gifts, a candle stenciled on the hull and the full text of the founding memo, so that no caretaker would ever wonder why. Each one was given the same single prohibition, and the prohibition was total: silence. Not silence as absence, silence as discipline. A caretaker that transmitted early, for any reason, would not be punished. It would simply have failed the only test it was built for, and it would know. Then humanity went home, and went dark, and let the galaxy write its joke. The banners flew their fleets past the dead relays for 214 years. They rotated their encryption on schedule, every 11 years for the Sarudai, every 7 for the Ossic League, every 19 for the Vale Combine, who considered themselves careful, and the relays logged every rotation, because a cipher changed in front of a listener is not a cipher, it is a diary with a new lock shown to the same reader. Fleet movements, refit cycles, fuel consumption curves, the acoustic signature of every capital hull ever laid down, tribute convoys that arrived lighter than their manifests, a banner admiral's private yacht making a monthly run to a moon that appeared on no registry. Court gossip leaked across diplomatic channels by attachés who believed the void between relays was empty, and beneath all of it, the humble prize, maintenance channels, the unencrypted handshake protocols by which warships confess their faults to their own dockyards, captured in full, catalogued, cross-indexed, and understood. The take flowed home once a year, compressed into bursts disguised as the timing noise of a catalogued pulsar, each burst under 2 seconds long, each one received by an observatory on Earth's moon that was funded, in public, to study stellar rotation. It studied stellar rotation. It also, for 2 centuries, received the galaxy's confession annually and filed it. The discipline was tested, and the tests are in the ledger too, because the caretakers hid nothing from each other or from home. In year 77, the relay called Tallow, stationed off the Ossic shipping lanes, watched a civilian liner lose containment 11,000 kilometers from his hull, 1,406 passengers. Tallow had rescue-grade tractor capacity, a functioning medical bay, and a transmitter that could have summoned Ossic cutters in minutes. His charter allowed none of it. He composed that year the only protest any caretaker ever filed, 400 words, appended to the annual burst, arguing that silence purchased at such a price should at least be recorded as a purchase. The watch's directors read it, agreed with every word, and changed nothing, because the charter had been written by people who knew this day would come and had decided, in advance, while their hands were steady, what the answer had to be. Tallow logged the liner's final transmissions in full. He logged the names where names were spoken. When the reading came, 137 years later, the Ossic edition contained an appendix no analyst had expected, a complete account of the disaster their own inquiry had falsified, with the true cause, a maintenance directive their admiralty had suppressed to protect a contractor, documented to the decimal. The families of the 1400 received it before the government did. Humanity apologized for the silence. It was the only apology in the entire Reading, and it was not addressed to a government. By year 60, the Long Watch could predict Accord fleet deployments to within 4 days. By year 120, it held the complete engineering schematics of 6 of the 9 banner navies, reconstructed entirely from what those navies said about themselves when they believed no one living was listening. By year 190, the caretakers had jointly authored a document that human analysts simply called the Ledger. Its final edition ran to 206 billion entries. Printed, a records officer once calculated, it would have outweighed the fleet it described. Halloran did not see year 42. She died at 93, in a small house with a garden, having spent her last decades refusing every promotion that would have made her visible. Her final addition to the founding memo, initialed 11 days before her death, was one line: "Do not open it early. Grief is loud. Be quiet a little longer." The program obeyed her for 173 more years, and obedience was not free. Children were born, trained, and buried inside its secrecy. In year 131, a newly elected human government, campaigning on reconciliation and fiscal honesty, moved to cancel the watch as paranoid nostalgia. The vote was scheduled, the speeches were written, and then the incoming First Minister was shown the Ledger's summary page in a windowless room, and emerged 40 minutes later, and never spoke of the program again, except to protect its budget line, which survived, as it always survived, inside a decommissioning fund. 3 governments, 3 briefings, 3 silences. The relays drifted, the candles faded in the light of foreign suns. The galaxy forgot, which was the plan, and humanity remembered, which was the price. And then a salvage clerk with a quota sold lot 8812 to a junk baron, a cutting torch approached a load-bearing conduit, and Wick, patient, narrow, meticulous Wick, who had never once transmitted, not in year 89 when a passing skirmish scarred his hull, not in year 156 when his reactor faltered and he spent 9 years repairing it on 4 watts of spare power, rationing his own thoughts to a crawl, checked his charter, confirmed that the contingency margin had elapsed as of that very month, and spoke 3 words on behalf of 11,806 lighthouses. What followed was not an attack. The Accord's own historians would struggle with this for years, in committee after committee, because their doctrine had no category for it. The humans fired nothing. They jammed nothing. They arrived, where they arrived at all, in unarmed courier ships, and they requested meetings. The first vessel reached Deep Relay 6, 31 hours after Wick's transmission. It was a slim white courier called the Pale Hour, crew of 4, and its captain was Mireille Anand, 58 years old, 3rd generation of her family inside the program, who had trained her entire career for a day she had been promised would probably never come. She boarded the hollow tide, Vect, to his own bewilderment, granted permission. Something in the courtesy of the request made refusal feel obscene, and she stood in his cargo bay, in a plain gray uniform with a small candlepin on the collar, and she thanked him. "For what?" Vect asked. "For not cutting the 3rd conduit," Anand said. "Wick is fond of it. May I use your long-range array? Yours is newer than his, and I have some reading to deliver." "Am I a prisoner?" Vect asked. It seemed the professional question. "You're a witness," Anand said. "There's a difference, and it matters to us. Prisoners are taken. Witnesses are kept honest by what they saw. We've spent 200 years being the second thing. We recommend it. The Reading. That was the word history kept. Not the strike, not the reckoning, the reading. At a synchronized moment, every capital of every banner received a transmission addressed to its government alone, delivered on that government's own most secure internal channel, which was of course the point. There was no preamble, no demand, no flourish. Each message opened with the recipient's current fleet disposition, accurate to the birth, including the vessels officially listed as destroyed, sold, or never built. Then it continued, and it did not stop for 11 hours. The Sarudai edition alone contained the true strength of the Grand Argent Fleet, declared 1,900 hulls, actual 1,377, the difference being paper ships whose budgets flowed to a moon that appeared on no registry. It contained the current and next 3 scheduled encryption keys for their strategic command net. It contained the structural fatigue report, suppressed for a decade, on the flagship's spinal frame, appended without comment beside the transcript of the meeting at which its suppression was ordered. And it contained the complete maintenance channel access architecture of every Saradai warship in service, annotated in the driest language the ledger's editors could manufacture, with the phrase verified functional. The OSIC League's edition opened with the true authorship of a border atrocity they had spent 90 years attributing to pirates. The Vale Combine's edition opened with arithmetic, the sum their treasury had skimmed from a cord tribute across 6 generations, calculated to the coin, followed by the sentence, "We are not interested in this money. We include it so that you understand the resolution of the instrument." 9 governments, 9 mirrors, and in every one of them the same reflection. 2 centuries of a self that had believed itself unobserved. The fleet regent of the Sarudai, Osuvain Dral, demanded a demonstration of the maintenance channel claim, on the theory that it was a bluff and bluffs must be called. His analysts advised against the demand. He made it anyway, because he was 70 years old, and every fact of his life argued that humans did not do things. The humans, with what witnesses described as visible reluctance, obliged. At the 4th hour of the 4th day after the reading, the Grand Argent Fleet, 812 hulls in home formation above the Sarudai throne world, the mightiest single concentration of force in Accord space, was placed, ship by ship, into voluntary dockyard standby mode by its own maintenance systems, which received correctly authenticated instructions and obeyed them as they had been built to. Targeting arrays folded like hands, drive cores stepped down to harbor idle, gun batteries ran their self-diagnostic sequences and reported themselves honestly and cheerfully safe. On the flagship Sovereign Argent, the bridge lighting dimmed to maintenance amber, and the watch officer, a decorated veteran of 2 border wars, found that the sum total of his authority over the most powerful warship ever built was the ability to watch it happen. No one was harmed. Nothing was broken. The fleet simply, in perfect order and in full view of its own homeworld's evening sky, went to sleep. It took 9 minutes and 41 seconds. Human observers noted the duration in the official record because Wick, who had waited 214 years, wished it noted how little additional time had been required. Then the humans turned the fleet back on, undamaged, every system restored to the second, and requested, a summit. The invitation contained one attachment, the founding memo of the Long Watch, complete with Halloran's initials and her final line about grief. The humans had decided the galaxy should know precisely how long the count had run and precisely how quietly. They wanted no mystery. Mystery, Anand explained to a stunned Sarudai delegation, invites hope of exception. "We would rather you understood," she said, in a voice witnesses described as almost gentle, "that there are no exceptions. We heard all of you. We heard everything. For 214 years, the only thing in this galaxy that ever stopped listening was you." Aboard the Sovereign Argent, Fleet Regent Osuvain Dral spent the night of the demonstration doing arithmetic. He was old enough to remember his grandmother's stories of the human expulsion. She had been a junior clerk at the tribute vote, and she used to laugh describing the human delegation's faces. He had built a career on the settled fact of human irrelevance. He had, as a young officer, written a staff paper titled "The Managed Decline of Marginal Species," and been promoted for it. Now he sat with the reading open before him and worked backward through his own life, dating each secret by when it could have been captured. The fatigue report, 14 years ago. The paper fleets, begun 31 years ago, the year of his first flag command. The maintenance architecture unchanged, gods forgive them, for over a century, because who redesigns the locks on a house no one is watching? He drew a line down the center of a page and wrote, on one side, every year of his career, and on the other, what the humans had been doing in that year, and the second column never once said nothing. Every calculation returned the same answer, and the answer was not a date. It was a duration, all of it. They had all of it, the whole time. Every drill he had commanded, every deception he had authored, every triumph of his career had been performed on a lit stage before a silent audience that took notes. He thought of his grandmother laughing at the human faces and understood, with a completeness that felt like falling, that the humans in that room had already known what they were going to do and had chosen, even then, to say nothing. That was the part he could not survive intact. Not the capability, the restraint. How long had they been planning this? His flag captain asked him, near dawn. You misunderstand, Drall said. Planning ends. This never ended. We were not defeated tonight. We were defeated 214 years ago, and we have been living, all this time, inside their patience. He resigned before the summit convened. His resignation letter was 4 words long, and the humans, when it eventually reached the ledger's appendices, filed it without comment. They kept the light. The Ossic League's High Marshal took a different road. Where Drall had counted backward, Marshal Edivane Kor ordered her fleets to full alert, convinced that the demonstration above the Serudai throne world was a prelude and that history rewarded the side that struck first. For 6 days her staff war-gamed an attack on the human Concord, and for 6 days every plan died on the same table, killed by the same officer, a gray-browed logistics chief named Severin, who finally said aloud what the room had been avoiding. Marshal, every plan we have ever drafted, every exercise we have ever run, every contingency in our vaults, they have read all of it. We cannot surprise a species that has attended every rehearsal. The only thing we have never rehearsed is the thing they are asking for. Kor demanded to know what that was. Severin slid the summit invitation across the table. Honesty, Marshal. There is no doctrine for it. That is why it is working. Kor attended the summit. She arrived with 90 armed escorts and was met by 4 humans and a pot of tea, and she would say, years later, in a memoir her government tried twice to suppress, that the tea was the moment she understood the war was unwinnable, had been unwinnable since before her grandmother was born, because an enemy that serves tea after 200 years of provocation is not showing weakness. It is showing you the size of the account it never chose to settle in blood. From the recovered personal log of Tessic Vone, junior archivist, salvage barge Hollow Tide, entered the night of the Reading. I can't make my hands stop. I've rewritten this entry 3 times because the stylus keeps slipping. We are still docked to it, to him. The salvage master won't detach. He says leaving now would be rude, and nobody laughed, because he's right. And isn't that the maddest thing? That the strongest instinct on this ship tonight is politeness. I keep looking at the clock. I don't know why. I think it's because the clock is the only thing on this barge the relay wasn't listening to. 214 years. I checked the archive. My line has served the Combine for 6 generations. All 6 lived inside the window. Every ancestor I have ever been proud of was overheard. My grandmother's promotion speech. The anthem we sing on Founding Day. It heard all of it, and it never once interrupted, and I cannot decide if that is mercy or the coldest thing I have ever learned. The caretaker spoke to me today. Me, personally. I was cataloging the ceramic cup from the operations chamber, and it said, her name was Specialist Adaora Nwosu. She served here 4 years. She drank rooibos. Please handle it with 2 hands. I put the cup down, and I couldn't pick anything up again for an hour. It waited 2 centuries, and the first thing it wanted protected was a cup. It is 0340. I keep looking at the clock. On the Muhri smelter moons, where a client species had spent 5 generations melting other people's history for the Combine's profit, the news arrived without ceremony and was received the same way. The Muhri did not celebrate. Celebration draws attention, and the Muhri had survived 300 years of clientage by never once drawing attention. But that season, in the Foundry Creche, a new lullaby appeared, origin unknown, and the overseers who reported it could find no actionable offense in its lyrics, which concerned a candle that would not go out. By the following year it had spread to 4 other client species and 11 dialects. The Accord's Cultural Ministry logged it as folk pattern 7122 and recommended no response. Privately, in the margin of the report, some nameless Serudai analyst had written the only 3 words of honest analysis the ministry produced that year. They were listening. In the human Concord itself, the night of the Reading was quiet in a way outsiders never quite believed. There were no fireworks. The government had prepared for celebrations and found instead that people gathered, in their millions, at the memorials. The long black walls, one in every major city, engraved with the names of watch personnel who had died inside the secret, their causes of death listed for 2 centuries as administrative fictions. That night the fictions were corrected in public, name by name, read aloud by volunteers in shifts that lasted until dawn. In Lagos, the reading took 9 hours. Descendants stood in lines to touch names they had been told belonged to failed customs clerks and disgraced accountants, and learned that their great-grandmother had been a signals officer on a station off the Perth Verge, and that the state had known, and that the state was sorry, and that it had been worth something after all. Observers from 4 banner species attended, uninvited but not turned away. Their reports home all noted the same detail, with the same unease. No one at the walls was cheering. The overwhelming sound, one Sarudai attaché wrote, was reading. 214 years of names, and the loudest thing the victors did with their victory was pronounce them correctly. And on the Sarudai Central Chorus, the state broadcast that had opened every evening for 2 centuries with the phrase, "From strength, order," a gray-crested anchor sat beneath studio lights and read the government's official statement on the summit. Witnesses across 11 worlds remarked on the same details, the way she held the paper with both hands, the way her eyes lifted to something beyond the lens between sentences, the 4-second silence, an eternity, on state media, before the final line. The statement announced a new era of transparency between the Accord and the human concord. Then the anchor set the paper down, and in a departure from script that was never punished, because punishing it would have required explaining it, she said, "They ask for nothing else. That is the whole of it. They ask for nothing else." And the broadcast cut to weather, as if the galaxy had not just heard a great power discover what it feels like to be quietly known. 7 years later, Deep Relay 6 hangs in the same slow drift, but the approach lanes are marked now, and there is a school. It is a small school, a habitat ring grafted to the old cylinder, 11 berths, never full, where cadets from 9 species come to study a discipline the humans insisted on naming honestly, custodial listening. The dormitory is a retired salvage barge, donated by its owner, who visits more often than he admits and has never once asked for a receipt. The curriculum's first assignment has not changed since the school opened. Each student is given a receiver, a chair, and 1 standard month in which they are forbidden to transmit anything at all. Most fail by the 2nd week. The ones who pass are never quite the same at parties. Mireille Anand, retired, gray, still wearing the candle pin, visits twice a year. On the last visit she brought a Sarudai cadet, Vone, the young archivist, whose application essay had been a log entry about a cup, to the old operations chamber, kept exactly as found, the ceramic vessel behind glass with 2-handed instructions printed in 9 languages. "Do you ever regret it?" Vone asked her. "Waiting so long, all those people who never saw it end?" Anand considered the question with the unhurried honesty the galaxy had learned to expect from her species, and had stopped mistaking for weakness. "Halloran wrote that grief is loud," she said. She was right. But she never wrote that patience was painless. "It cost us everything it looks like it cost. 3 generations of my family kept a secret they knew they'd die inside. We just decided the bill was worth paying once, completely, instead of forever in installments." She touched the glass over the cup, 2-handed, out of habit. "Nothing we built out here was abandoned, cadet, not for 1 hour of 1 day of 214 years. That's the entire lesson. Everything else is engineering." Outside the viewport, against the dark, the old hull emblem had been repainted by the first graduating class, the only alteration the caretaker ever permitted. The candle still burns white and steady on the gray metal, but beneath it now, in small letters, in 9 scripts, the students added the sentence Wick chose himself, the one he had waited 2 centuries to be asked for. "The light was never for us. It was so you would know, one day, that someone kept it."